and I was sitting in front of my pool in Miami Beach, and it was just dead calm. But I was watching CNBC, and in CNBC, at some point, it became clear that that if you actually were in Wall Street or you owned a bunch of financial assets, you're probably going to be okay. But if you're on Main Street and you're trying to actually do things like run a restaurant or a yoga salon, you were going to have a bad year. And so at that point, I said, well, I have all this cash and it's worthless, like 0 interest rates. And the central banker said, we're not even thinking about raising interest rates for 4 years. So you have a non-performing asset. And then I looked at the government basically printing money. I thought if we shut down the economy for 2 years, that's going to cost a lot of money. And that's going to get printed. And so I saw hyperinflation, coming at the end of those lockdowns. And I noticed my money was a melting ice cube. And I thought, and so if you think of it as currency, you get really confused because you want to buy coffee with it. But the truth is, no currencies are good stores of value. You wouldn't want to hold $1 million of dollars or pesos or marks or francs or yen or anything for 100 years.
Right.
But if you go and you ask the question, what did it cost for an acre of land in Manhattan in 1900? What did it cost for an acre of land in Palm Beach in 1900? I live in Miami Beach. The land that my house is on was $10,000 an acre in 1930. Now it's $20 million an acre.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you ask the question, what did your Monet cost in 1930 and what does it cost today? The point really is the people that bought Palm Beach or Hamptons real estate or Monet's or they want to buy Bitcoin, those are not speculators and you just want the economic exposure. You might just buy the spot ETF, and there are spot ETFs like IBIT from BlackRock or FBTC. And every country in the world, right? There are ETFs in Europe and there are ETFs in Brazil and there are ETFs in Germany and Australia and the like. And for some people, what they should hold is they should hold Bitcoin wrapped as a security. Now if you're a senior citizen and you just kind of want it in your retirement account or something and you want to be invested 2% in it or 3% in it, in that particular case, that might also make sense because you just pick up the phone, call your broker and say, just buy me a bunch of this thing. And you put the phone down after 10 seconds and it's done. And your bank, JP Morgan or Wells Fargo or whatever, Morgan Stanley, they've just done it for you and it took 10 seconds. And my 86-year-old father is you're not leaving your living room, for the rest of your life. At that point, then probably you take a different view because you're different. And companies, like my company, MicroStrategy, we hold Bitcoin because we want to be able to move the Bitcoin between any custodian in the world or take self-custody. And when you do that as a commodity, there's no taxable event. So you're keeping optionality. If I needed to put it in London or I needed to move it between 100 different custodians, or if I wanted to take self-custody, I can do that without a taxable event. I wouldn't hold the security because right now securities law in the US and the treatment of Bitcoin ETFs is you would have to sell the ETF, take a taxable capital gain, and then move the cash and then repurchase somewhere else. And that's a inefficiency of the current market structure.
Believer that some of your success comes from a certain daily routine. Do you have one? Do you think it's important? You're worth maybe $10 billion. Do you think a big part of your success has been a disciplined daily routine or not so much?
I think a lot of different routines work for different people. It depends on your culture and where you live. But right now, my daily routine would be to be up with the sunlight. So when the sun rises, I'm moving. Make sure I start the day with a bit of exercise. Then study and absorb what's going on in the marketplace, and then start to engage And I've got a bunch of business, projects and activities I'm always working on. And then I've got a bunch of communication. So I think that if you combine that with focus, I would say the principles are Bitcoin podcast and then start to dig into all the literature. There's, eventually I end up, say, going through 4, 5, 6 different courses on Bitcoin and watching thousands of hours or consuming thousands of hours of content. But if someone were to ask the question, how do I come up to speed on Bitcoin? I would say, just remember Bitcoin is hope, and type in HOPE, go to hope.com. That's my website. And on my website, I have books, papers, courses, videos, all sorts of leaders. And you can certainly sift through that and find materials. And in the absence of that, go to YouTube and just start Googling and then find the most popular, videos. And a lot's been said. I think once you're focused on it, you'll actually take away what you need to know about the subject.
Yeah.
Is on a global basis. I think that it, in a way, it demonetizes the incentives for war. If a nation has the majority of its assets in land, you can simply take the land. But if a nation has the majority of its assets in Bitcoin, no amount of violence will allow you to seize their property because it's in cyberspace. So when your property is in your head or in your private possession, there's an incentive for hostile actors to negotiate with you. Whereas, if all your wealth was literally a bar of gold, I could just shoot you and take the bar of gold. I could even bomb your house and take the gold. The gold doesn't get destroyed. So I think that that digital property is a much better, a more secure idea. There was electricity, and it used to be electricity people were the innovators, and then there's AT&T, but AT&T didn't invent Google. And and large banks in the U.S. aren't responsible for giving bank accounts to people in Africa or war zones. So they're thinking about their frame of reference. He or Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, they have their frame of reference, but they're not 20-something years old in Venezuela or Argentina watching their money melt down a toilet, right? And they're not fleeing from a war zone in Afghanistan or Iraq. And they're not providing banking services to people in Siberia or in Ukraine in the middle of a war, right? So I think that the people that embrace crypto and embrace Bitcoin, there and then thousands and thousands of books. And I was inspired by especially science fiction, Robert Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov. And from a very early age in elementary school, I was thinking I should go to MIT and build spaceships because that's what the hero does, and have spacesuit world travel. So I think that helped. And then I think when I got to MIT, I met a lot of extraordinarily well-educated people from good backgrounds. And then I encountered some great professors. And I remember one professor walking out saying, I just talked to NASA. This tile fell off the space shuttle. They don't know why it burned off on reentry, but they want to figure out how to fix it. What do you think we should do? And I was 18 years old. And this guy with a PhD who consulted with NASA scientists was pretty much saying, here's a thing, just whenever you've got some money and you don't need it, for a near-term expenditure, you just progressively invest. Just like, again, in 1900, I would have said every year you buy a little bit of Central Park, and then over 20 years, you'll own a lot of Central Park, and then your grandkids will thank you for having bought that. So that would be my suggestion.
So on the inverse, let's say somebody has put money in and they put 1,000 in and now it's worth 10,000 and they need some income. They need to pay a bill for $2,000. Are you a fan of reverse dollar cost averaging, dollar cost sell? So you go, okay, let's sell a little bit every week.
I think the smartest thing to do is if you have Bitcoin, and I would sell every other asset first. I would mortgage my house first. I would sell my chairs. I would sell other